everybody. I'm Matt Phipps-Taylor. I'm the Head of Insight and Innovation at PPL in the UK, which is a great job title. I am going to talk to you today about PPL's specialist subject, which is performance rights. And I'm going to tell you about the basic recipe for performance rights, and I'm going to give you some insight into how PPL use that and what we do. So, music plus plays plus data equals pays. So first thing there is music. But before we can talk about music, we actually have to start with members, because it is PPL's members, that's rights holders and performers, who make music and are the reason that we exist. Rights holders, typically record companies, but increasingly that's self-releasing artists. And then our 65,000 odd performer members. So they tell us about their music, so that we have this monster database of over 10 million sound recordings. And when I say music, I do mean recorded music, so that's sound recordings. We don't look after writers or publishers, that's our cousins at PRS. And with those 10 million sound recordings, we then license them to broadcasters. So over 20 in the UK, more than 400 TV channels, all the biggest commercial radio services, well, in fact, all commercial radio services, and swathes of smaller radio services like community radio and student radio and hospital radio, and some digital services like Catch Up and Simulcast. And we also license for public performance. So over 380,000 venues in the UK have a license from us. So that's everything from pubs, clubs, cafes, hairdressers, bakeries, shops, factories, offices, anywhere that's playing recorded music. And then finally, we collect internationally from other organisations like us that are doing the same kind of thing. So we've got more than 80 agreements in place in more than 40 countries. And now I'm going to jump to the other end of the recipe and just touch on the pays, because this gives you the kind of sense of scale of what we're doing. So we're, having licensed all of that music, we're then collecting for it. So that's £76 million from broadcasters, £84 million from public performance, and £37 million from other countries. And that is, I think, over a third of all of the money that changes hands between all of the organisations like us in the globe is actually coming to PPL. Those are our 2015 numbers. We haven't announced our 2016 numbers yet, except for our international collections, which have jumped up, I think, to 49 million. So we're seeing really great growth in that market. So by the time we've collected all of that money and deducted some costs, we're left with 170 million that we can pay out to members, and that's growing. And in fact, there's a bigger story of growth there, because for the last 5 years, it's grown quite significantly. So lesson one about this market is it is growing. And in fact, I think in 2015, we collected £1 for every £5.40 in recorded music and streaming sales in the UK. So it's quite a substantial market. So next item in the recipe is plays. How do we get all of that money that we've collected back to our members? Plays is a key component, because what gets played determines who gets paid. So we've got some distribution policies which are published, which set out our goals, and that is to pay fairly, efficiently, accurately, promptly, and in a cost-effective manner, and to allocate fairly in accordance with the usage of a sound recording. So a key thing there is about the usage. So obviously we're going to pay based on the stuff that actually gets used. There is a fine balance to be maintained between accurac and value. Obviously, if you've got a small workplace that's only got 3 people in it, it might be paying as little as £45 a year to be able to play sound recordings. How much effort you're going to go to work out exactly what they paid, to be able to pay on £45. So where do we get our information from? Well, we collect usage, as we call it, from more than 260 radio sources, more than 340 TV sources, and that's basically monitoring everything that they do. That's not sampling or anything like that. We have reporting from over 300 of our biggest public performance licensees. It's more than 29,000 sites. That's the biggest pub chains, restaurant chains, cafe chains, hotel chains, and so on. We also survey a whole bunch of our licensees to understand what kind of stuff they're playing. 16,000 licensees, a lot more sites. And we're constantly working on how we innovate. And actually, we announced at the end of last year that we're currently running a 6-month trial jointly with PRS to test audio recognition, music recognition technology for detecting what actually gets played in nightclubs. So at the moment, that's being rolled out over the next couple of months. I think we're already collecting information from Ministry of Sound and another 6 or 7 nightclub venues, so we can evaluate whether it's any good. So when you add all of that up, in 2015, we collected and processed over 400 billion seconds of stuff that got played, which is about 12,500 years, if that's an easier number to work with. And again, that's growing every year. It's interesting hearing earlier people talking about this being the year of data, or everyone's not talking about data. We've been doing this for years, lots and lots of data. So what does get played? What can I tell you about that? Well, for 2015, by the time we've matched all of that stuff and we've taken out anything that's out of copyright or that wasn't covered by a license and so on, we end up with 695,041 unique sound recordings. Obviously, that many sound recordings do not get released in a year. So when we break that down, actually a fraction of that is current stuff, and actually 88% of that is catalogue music. And I should add, our definition of catalogue in this sense, so this is 2015, so we would call current anything first released in 2014 or 2015. So catalogue is 2013 and previous. And that's the sound recording rather than the release. So actually if something was re-released, we would still be looking at the original sound recording. Out of those nearly 700,000 recordings, 132,000 were totally new, so they'd never been allocated any money before. And obviously, a bigger proportion of those is actually current music versus catalogue, but still a lot of catalogue stuff that's getting played for the first time. If we look at our top 100, actually 89 out of that top 100 is current music. You might be thinking, top 100? Well, obviously, those 695,000 recordings do not all get the same amount of value attributed to them, because it depends where they get played, who played them how many times, and so on. So we end up with a kind of ranking. So that's where our top 100 comes from. And then if we look at everything by value, we see that actually nearly a third of value is going to current music. So you could take lesson 2 from this, minor lesson 2 or lesson 3, which is catalogue music is earning good money from performance royalties. And we can look at that in a bit more detail, actually, and just see how old is it. So actually, we've got 2 little charts there. One is the count, and you can see that actually music from the 2000s makes up the majority of it. But actually, when you spread it by value, it just emphasizes that older music is still earning good money from performance rights. What else can we tell you? We can go into lesson 3, which is a play does not equal a play. Just to put some colour to that, picking some extremes. Radio North Angus Community Service up in Scotland for any non-UK attendees. It's a great service, but it's quite small. Obviously, if you get played on something like that, that's not going to be quite the same value as getting played on something like Radio 2. We can also, it's not just about the kind of size of the station you get played on. Pick 2 services here that have got a similar size audience. I think they're both about 2 million audience or so. But quite different in terms of the diversity of music they play. Does anyone want to have a guess at how many unique recordings, so how many different recordings, does Six Music play in a year? Any guesses? Hands up. 8,000 I got from Chris. Going once, going twice. 50,000. Okay, good extremes. Between you, you're kind of on the average. So sort of 29,000 from Six Music. Compare that to Capital FM, 614. This is not actually to scale because the bar goes way off the end, so I had to shorten it down a little bit. So, the lesson here is, obviously, if you're in that 614, you're probably getting played more times, so it's going to accrue more value. While it's great to be on Six Music, probably not going to get played as many times. What else can we say? We could have another look at some radio services. So these are the 3 biggest music-playing radio services in the UK. Still quite diverse in terms of the number of recordings that they're going to play in 2015. What's really interesting is looking at the overlap. This is kind of the secret. In terms of the overlap, there's just 405 recordings got played by all 3 of those services. I should add at this point that we have no influence over what gets paid by those services. It was fascinating listening to Kate from Radio 1 talk earlier about how they choose their playlists. You should definitely be talking to her about getting included in that number, not talking to us. But that is the sweet spot. So if you can get in that number, you're doing really well. So more than 50% of our top 100 came from that sweet spot there between Heart Radio 2 and Radio 1. What else can I tell you? So I talked about our top 100. We can have a look at our top 100 compared to the official charts company top 100 for 2015. As you can see, there is quite a lot of overlap, but it's not complete overlap. So there's a lot of stuff that's earning money from us that might not be earning as much from sales and streaming. And that's fairly constant over the last 3 years. we can also look at where the music comes from. So just looking at the country of recording for our top 100, about 40% or so comes from the UK, USA, and then just a little bit from other. Biggest country in other, Sweden, third largest exporter of music. Pretty consistently, in fact, for the last couple of years, there's 6 or 7 recordings in there from Sweden. So, we have talked about the music, we've talked about how we collect usage or plays, and as I said, what gets played determines who gets paid. So, who did get paid? So 2015, I think it was 65,000 performers got paid by PPL, and just over 6,000 rights holders. And really pleasingly, that continues to grow year on year. So we paid 14% of those had never been paid before by us. Last part of the recipe is data. This is the most critical part of the recipe. In fact, I would describe it as the special sauce. That's meant to be a sauce there. Why is it the special sauce? Well, it's all about the ingredients. I think this is lesson 5 from today, is that data is absolutely critical. We have been doing it for a long time. If I stick with my culinary theme for a second, we think that we have the finest ingredients because it's like direct from farm. We get our ingredients, we get our data directly from record companies. Plus, we have this database that performers can come along, they can search it, they can make sure that they're linked. When we're talking about data in this context, we're talking about the information about what is the recording, what are the codes of the recording, who are the people that own the rights to it, how long have they owned the rights, what years they own the rights, what releases is it associated with, who performed it, what role did they play. We have a team of data specialists who spend a lot of time making sure that that is as good as it can be. And we invest in great tools because when you've got 30,000 new recordings being registered every week, you can't check all of them. So we actually invest in some really great tools to help us find any instances of things that are missing or haven't been registered correctly. We're currently trialing some sort of recommendation engine technology, a bit like that used by Netflix and Amazon, that says, if you've got these 3 people that often play together and you've only got 2 of them over here, then perhaps you're missing one and you should go and check. Which does leave me with my final message, which is about the homework. And having just said about the importance of data, it'd be remiss if we didn't tell you how to do something about it. So the message here is, take responsibility and check your data. You can register with PPL, gives you access to the portal. Then it lets you search the repertoire database, shows you who we think is associated with all recordings, who owns the rights and so on. Gives the opportunity to make claims on recordings. Allows you to sign up for our international collection service and benefit from some of that 49 million that we've been collecting. And finally, allows you to tell us about your contact details and your bank details so that we know how to pay you and how to tell you that we've paid you. Okay, well, we'll be here afterwards, so if anybody's got any questions, then come and ask me.
Fantastic, thank you, Matt.